Hi, welcome to Lies and Secrets channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. I thought life in our 1964 suburban home was simple, predictable until that one ordinary Sunday morning when everything changed there. I was in my floral dress fixing our wobbly coffee table when Edward, our boisterous bulldog, did something so shocking, so utterly bizarre that it left me reeling. Now, as I hear Jacob's car pulling into the driveway, my heart pounds with the weight of a secret that could unravel our perfect life. How will I look him in the eye? What will I say? The moment of truth is upon me, and I'm standing here wondering if this will be the end or just the beginning of a new untold chapter in our marriage. Here I am, Luna, living in a quaint little house with my husband Jacob in the heart of 1964's suburbia. The world outside was changing with the Vietnam War protests echoing through the streets. But inside our home life was supposed to be simple, predictable. It was a typical Sunday morning. The sun was just beginning to peek through the curtains, casting a soft glow over our living room. I was in my house clothes, a simple floral dress that had seen better days, trying to fix a wobbly leg on our old wooden coffee table. Jacob had gone out to run some errands, leaving me with our bulldog Edward, a loyal but overly enthusiastic bulldog. I was on my knees, screwdriver in hand, when Edward, in his usual playful manner, decided to join in. He bounded over his tail, wagging furiously. I tried to shoo him away, but he was having none of it. And then, in a moment that would change everything, Edward did something so unexpected, so out of character, that it left me in shock. Well, let's just say Edward got a bit too excited, and in his enthusiasm he did something that in any other context would be humorous or even endearing. But there on that quiet Sunday morning it was anything but. His actions were so forceful, so sudden, that I was left reeling both physically and emotionally. I couldn't believe what had just happened. My mind raced, trying to process the bizarre turn of events. How could I explain this to Jacob? How could I even begin to confess something? So the guilt, the confusion, it all swirled inside me like a storm. I felt like I had betrayed Jacob, even though it was Edward who had acted out of instinct. But the line between innocence and guilt blurred in that moment, and I was left questioning everything as I sat there still on the floor, the screwdriver forgotten. I heard the sound of Jacob's car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded in my chest. How would I look him in the eye? How could I possibly explain this without sounding insane? And as the front door opened, I knew I had to make a choice. Do I tell the truth, as bizarre as it was? Or do I keep this secret locked away, hoping it would fade into the background of our lives? The door creaked open and Jacob stepped inside, his face lighting up with a smile. "Hey, honey. I'm home," he called out, unaware of the turmoil in my heart, and there, with the weight of the world on my shoulders, I stood up, brushing off my dress, and forced a smile. "Welcome back," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, the secret burning inside me like a silent fire. What would happen next? How would this change our lives? Our marriage? The answers were as elusive as the morning mist outside our window. Here I am, Luna, standing in our cozy living room, the floral dress clinging to my skin as if it could absorb the shock and confusion swirling within me. Jacob, with his usual warmth, was oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. He set down the grocery bags, his eyes catching mine, searching for the usual warmth of our Sunday greetings. "Did you manage to fix the table?" he asked, his voice echoing the simplicity of our life together. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, it's all set now." The words felt hollow, a stark contrast to the turmoil. Inside, Jacob moved closer, his hand reaching out to brush a stray hair from my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Luna, everything." "Kka." I forced a laugh which came out more like a choked sob, just a bit tired. "I guess Edward was quite the handful today." Jacob chuckled, unaware of the double meaning. My words carried that bulldog, always getting into mischief. "Did he try to help you with the furniture again?" I swallowed hard, the memory of Edward's unexpected behavior flashing before my eyes. You could say that I managed my voice barely above a whisper. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. As Jacob's presence filled it with his usual comforting aura, He began unpacking the groceries, talking about the mundane details of his trip to the store, the new neighbor he met, and how he thought about bringing home some flowers. For me, each word was a reminder of the life we had built, now teetering on the edge of something unknown as he spoke. I watched him trying to find the courage to speak the unspeakable. But how could I? How could I tell him that our bulldog, in a moment of misguided enthusiasm, had crossed a line that should never be crossed? The thought alone made my stomach churn. Jacob paused, looking at me with concern. "Luna, are you sure you're all right? You seem off." I took a deep breath, the weight of my secret pressing down on me. "Jacob, there's something I need to tell you." I started, my voice trembling. He stopped, his full attention now on me, his eyes searching mine for clues. "What is it, honey?" My heart raced, the confession on the tip of my tongue, but then the phone rang, slicing through the tension like a knife. Jacob, ever the dutiful husband, moved to answer it, giving me a moment to collect myself. "It's your sister," he said, handing me the receiver with a puzzled look. I took it, grateful for the interruption, yet dreading the conversation ahead. "Hi, Freya," I said, my voice steadier. Now, as I spoke with my sister, discussing nothing of importance, my mind was elsewhere, wrestling with the decision of whether to tell Jacob or to bury this bizarre incident deep within the recesses of our life. Together, the call ended and Jacob was back, his expression now one of mild irritation. "Everything okay with Freya?" "Yes, just catching up," I replied, setting the phone down. Jacob returned to his task, but his earlier concern lingered in the air. "You were saying something before the phone rang." I looked at him, his face so open, so trusting. Could I really shatter that trust with something so outlandish, so wrong? "I just wanted to say I love you," I said, the words slipping out, a half-truth, a shield against the full confession. Jacob smiled, his eyes softening. "I love you too, Luna, more than anything." And there it was, the moment passed, the secret still locked away. But as I watched him, the love of my life, I knew this wasn't the end. The seed of doubt had been planted, and whether I liked it or not, our life was about to change. As he turned back to the groceries, I whispered to myself, "But how much, Jacob? How much will it change?" Question hung in the air, unanswered, as I stepped into the kitchen to help him, the weight of my silence heavier than ever. As the days turned into weeks, the incident with Edward became a silent specter in our home. Every time Jacob looked at me with his trusting eyes, the guilt gnawed at me like a relentless beast. I found myself growing more distant, not from lack of love, but from the weight of the secret I carried. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Jacob noticed the change. "Sa, you've been so quiet lately. Is something bothering you?" His voice was gentle, concerned, yet there was an edge of worry that hadn't been there before. I stirred my soup, the steam rising like my unvoiced confessions. "I guess I've just been thinking a lot," I said, avoiding his gaze, about what he pressed, his fork pausing mid-air. I took a deep breath, the words almost escaping me. "Just life, I suppose. Changes, you know." It was a vague answer, but it was all I could muster. Jacob reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "You know, you can talk to me about anything, right?" I nodded, feeling the warmth of his touch, yet it felt like a lie. How could I tell him about Edward? How could I explain that our bulldog, in a moment of misguided affection, had done something so inappropriate? The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken words and hidden truths. Jacob's eyes searched mine, looking for the truth. I couldn't give him that night. After Jacob fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the shadows playing tricks on my mind. The next morning, I decided to take Edward for a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear my head as we walked. Edward was his usual self, oblivious to the turmoil he'd caused. The park. I met Freya, my sister, who was out with her kids. Her presence was a relief, a distraction from my spiraling thoughts. "You look like you haven't slept in days," Freya commented, her eyes sharp with sisterly concern. "It's just life," I sighed, not wanting to delve into the real issue. Freya gave me a knowing look. Luna, if something's wrong, you need to talk about it. Secrets have a way of eating you alive. Her words hit too close to home. I wanted to tell her to unburden myself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about her children, her life, anything to steer away from my own. Later, back at home, Jacob was waiting for me, his expression unreadable. I got a call from work. He began, his voice tight. They're sending me to New York for a week. It's a big project and they need me there. The news was like a cold splash of water. A week apart might give me space to think, to decide what to do about Edward, about us. That's good, right? I managed, trying to sound supportive. Jacob nodded, but his eyes didn't meet mine. Yeah, it's a great opportunity. But Luna, when I come back, we need to talk, really talk. The implication was clear. He sensed something was off, something I hadn't shared. My heart sank. This wasn't just about his work trip. It was about us, about the trust that was fraying at the edges. As Jacob packed his suitcase, I felt a mix of relief and dread. The house would be quiet without him, but it would also be a week of solitude, with my thoughts, with Edward, and with the secret that wouldn't let me rest. The day Jacob left, I stood at the door, watching his car disappear down the street. Edward sat beside me, his tail thumping against the floor. Unaware of the storm he'd unleashed, I turned back inside the silence of the house, enveloping me. The week stretched ahead, each day a potential turning point. Would I find the courage to confront this bizarre situation, or would I let it fester, changing the very fabric of our marriage? As I walked through the empty rooms, I whispered to myself, what will I do? Jacob? What will become of us? Question echoed in the quiet, a prelude to the storm that was yet to come. As the days passed in Jacob's absence, the silence of the house grew louder, each tick of the clock a reminder of the secret. Harvard Edward, ever the loyal companion, followed me around, his presence, a constant reminder of that fateful Sunday morning. I tried to busy myself with chores, with reading, with anything that would keep my mind from wandering back to the incident. But the solitude only amplified my thoughts. One afternoon, while sorting through some old photographs, I stumbled upon a picture of Jacob and me from our honeymoon. We looked so happy, so carefree. The guilt washed over me anew, not just for what happened with Edward, but for the distance I felt growing between us. I realized then that keeping this secret wasn't just about protecting Jacob's feelings. It was about preserving the illusion of our perfect life. The phone rang, breaking my reverie. It was Freya again, her voice a lifeline in my sea of turmoil. Hey, Luna, how are you holding up with Jacob Way? She asked, her tone light but probing. I'm managing, I replied, my voice betraying the storm inside, just keeping busy. Freya sensed something was off, sometimes talking about what's bothering. You can make it lighter. Remember when we were kids and we'd share our secrets under the oak tree? I smiled at the memory, but it was tinged with sadness. Some secrets are too heavy even for oak trees. Freya, there was a pause. Then is it about Jacob or something else? I hesitated, the words on the tip of my tongue, but instead of confessing, I deflected. It's just the usual marriage stuff. You know how it is. Freya didn't push, but her silence spoke volumes. Well, if you ever need to talk, I'm here, and remember, Luna, honesty is the cornerstone of any relationship. Her words echoed in my mind. Long after we hung up, honesty, could I really tell Jacob the truth? Would it set us free or shatter us completely? That night I lay in bed, the emptiness beside me, a stark reminder of Jacob's absence. Edward was curled up at the foot of the bed, his breathing steady and comforting in the quiet. I whispered to the darkness, what would you do, Jacob, if you knew? The week dragged on, each day, a battle between the urge to confess and the fear of the consequences. I found myself avoiding Edward, his innocent eyes a mirror to my guilt. Then, on the day before Jacob was due back, something unexpected happened. I was in the garden pulling weeds when Edward, in a burst of energy, chased after a squirrel. He darted across the road, and in that split second my heart stopped. A car screeched to a halt, narrowly missing him. I ran over, heart pounding, and scooped him up, my relief palpable but mixed with a surge of anger. Why do you have to be so reckless? I scolded him, my voice breaking. Edward just licked my face, oblivious to the chaos he'd caused in my life. That evening I sat on the porch, Edward at my feet, watching the sunset. Colors were vivid, almost mocking in their beauty. I knew I couldn't keep this secret any longer. Jacob deserved the truth, no matter how bizarre or painful it might be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I made my decision. I would tell him. I had to. The alternative was a life of half-truths and shadows, and I couldn't bear that for us. The next morning, Jacob returned. His face lit up when he saw me, but there was a question in his eyes. A shadow of the conversation we'd postponed. Luna. I've missed you, he said, pulling me into a hug. I've missed you too, I replied. My voice steady but my heart racing. Jacob, we need to talk. There's something I need to tell you. He stepped back, his expression turning serious. What is it? I took a deep breath, the words forming a lump in my throat. It's about Edward. Something happened while you were gone. Jacob's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I looked into his eyes, searching for the strength to continue. Edward. He did something that well. It was an accident, but it's been weighing on me. Jacob's face was a mix of confusion and concern. Luna, what are you talking about? And there, with the weight of our future hanging in the balance, I began to explain, each word a step closer to the truth, each sentence a potential unraveling of our life together. Edward, in his excitement, he got too close, too personal. It was an accident, but I've been carrying this secret and it's tearing me apart. Jacob's reaction was unreadable, his eyes searching mine for the truth, for understanding. The air was thick with tension, the silence between us, a chasm waiting to be bridged or to widen. Further. Jacob, I need you to understand. I pleaded, my voice trembling. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. The moment stretched on Jacob's face, a mask of shock and confusion. What would he say? How would this change us? The answers were as elusive as ever, but the truth was now out, hanging in the air between us like a tangible thing. Jacob's face went through a series of emotions, from confusion to disbelief, and then to something darker, something I couldn't quite read. He stepped back, his eyes, never leaving mine, as if trying to see through to my soul. Luna, are you saying? Edward? His voice was a whisper, strained with the effort to understand. I nodded, the tears now streaming down my face. Yes, Jacob. It was an accident, but it happened. I've been so scared to tell you, so ashamed. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock, each second stretching out like an eternity. Jacob's hands clenched into fists, then relaxed as if he was fighting an internal battle. How could you keep this from me? His voice was low, the hurt evident. I didn't know how to say it. I was afraid of losing you, of losing us. Confessed, my voice breaking. Jacob turned away, his shoulders tense. I could see the muscles in his back, tight tan under his shirt. He walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street. His back to me, the silence was deafening, filled with the weight of my confession. Through what felt like an age, he turned back to face me. His eyes were red, his expression a mix of pain and confusion. Luna, this changes everything. I need time to think. My heart sank. Jacob, please, I didn't want this to happen. I love you and I. He held up a hand, stopping me. I need to process this. Luna, alone. His voice was firm, yet there was a tremor of vulnerability. He grabbed his coat from the rack and headed towards the door. I'll be at the hotel for a few days. I need space. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me in the silence of our home, the echo of his departure reverberating through the walls. Edward, sensing the tension, whimpered at my feet, his tail no longer wagging. I sank to the floor. The weight of my confession now fully realized. The truth was out, but at what cost? The uncertainty of our future loomed. Large, a dark cloud over what was once a sunny life. Days turned into nights, and Jacob did not return. Each moment without him stretched longer. filled with regret and longing. I replayed our conversation over and over, wondering if there was something else I could have said, something that might have changed his reaction. Then one evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, the phone rang. My heart leaped, hoping it was Jacob. It was Freya. "Luna, I've been worried. How are things with Jacob?" Her voice was gentle, probing. "He's gone. Freya, he needed time away after I told him about Edward," I said, me voice hollow. Freya was silent for a moment. "Oh, Luna, I'm so sorry. Have you heard from him?" "No, not yet. I'm just waiting, hoping he'll come back that we can talk this through," I replied. The hope in my voice as fragile as glass. "Give him time. Luna, he loves you. He'll come around," she said, trying to reassure me. But as the days continued to pass, my hope began to wane. The house felt empty, the silence more oppressive. I started to wonder if Jacob would ever return, if our marriage could survive this bizarre twist of fate. One late night, as I sat in the dim light of the living room, the front door opened. My heart stopped. Jacob stood there, his face unreadable in the shadow. "Luna," he began, his voice hoarse from days of silence, "we need to talk." I stood up, my legs shaky. "Jacob." He stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "Let me speak first," he said, his eyes searching mine. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened. It's not something I ever imagined dealing with." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. But he continued. "I realized something out there. I love you, Luna, more than I can put into words. And if we're going to make it through this, it has to be together, with honesty." Tears welled up in my eyes, relief flooding through me. "Jacob, I'm so sorry. I was scared, but I never wanted to hurt you." He took my hands in his grip firm. "I know, and I believe you, but we need to rebuild. Trust. Luna. We need to start over in a way." I squeezed his hands, nodding, "Yes, anything. I'll do anything to make this right." Jacob pulled me into an embrace, his arms strong around me. "We'll figure this out together, but it starts with understanding, with talking, with being open." As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since that fateful morning, there was a glimmer of hope. The storm wasn't over, but perhaps we could weather it together. Question lingered in the air, a silent echo of our past and a whisper of what might come. What will become of us now? As the days turned into weeks, Jacob and I embarked on a journey of rebuilding. It wasn't easy. Trust that had been shattered required patience and a lot of talking. We started with small steps, sharing our days, our thoughts, our fears. In a way, we hidden before the secret had forced us into a deeper level of communication, one where silence was no longer an option. Edward, our unwitting catalyst, became a symbol of our new beginning. Jacob, after his initial shock and anger, began to see Edward not as the cause of our turmoil, but as a part of our family that needed understanding. We enrolled him in obedience classes, not just for his benefit, but as a way for us to work together to heal together. The nights were the hardest. The bed felt too big, too empty when Jacob was away, and when he returned, there was an awkwardness, a hesitancy in our touches, but slowly we found our way back to each other. Jacob would reach for my hand under the covers, and I would squeeze back, a silent promise of our commitment to mend what was broken. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Jacob spoke softly. "Luna, I've been thinking maybe we should go away for a while, just the three of us, a fresh start away from here." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Where would we go?" I asked, my voice a mix of hope and fear. "Anywhere," he replied, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "Somewhere new where we can be just us without the shadows of the past, the thought of leaving our home." Our life was daunting, but the prospect of rediscovering each other was too tempting to ignore. We decided on a small cabin in the mountains, a place where the air was crisp and the world seemed to slow down. Packing for the trip was like packing away our old life. Each item we chose was a step towards something new. Edward, now more disciplined, watched us with his head tilted, perhaps sensing the change in the air. The drive to the mountains was quiet, filled with the hum of the car and the occasional song on the radio. Jacob's hand found mine and we drove in silence, each lost in our thoughts but together in our journey. Cabin was rustic, surrounded by pine trees and the scent of nature. It was here, away from the familiar, that we truly began to talk, not just about Edward, but about everything, our dreams, our fears, the little things we've let slide over the years. One night by the fire, Jacob looked at me, his eyes serious. "Luna, I need to know, do you still love me after everything?" I looked at him, the firefight dancing in his eyes, and I knew my answer: yes. "Jacob, I love you more than I can say. I was scared, but I never stopped loving you." He pulled me close, and in that embrace I felt the weight of the past begin to lift. We talked about Edward, about how his actions, though bizarre, had brought us to this point of honesty. We laughed at the absurdity of it all, not in a way that diminished the gravity, but in a way that allowed us to see the light in our darkness. The days in the mountains were filled with hikes, with moments of silence where we just listened to the wind, and with nights where we shared stories under the stars. It was here that Jacob proposed something unexpected. "I think we should get another bulldog," he said one morning, his voice tentative. I looked at him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah, Edward needs a friend, and maybe, just maybe, it'll be a new chapter for us, a symbol of moving forward." The idea was comforting: a new bulldog, a new bond, a new layer to our family. We agreed to look for one when we got back home. Our time in the mountains was like a balm to our wounds. We returned home not as the same people who left, but as a couple who had faced a storm and were still standing, albeit a bit battered, back in our quaint little house life. Resumed, but with a different rhythm. We adopted a playful puppy, a golden retriever we named Hope. Edward, now older and wiser, took to her with a gentle patience that surprised us both. The days passed, and with each one the incident with Edward became less of a specter and more of a distant memory. Jacob and I found a new normal, one where honesty was our foundation, where we faced our problems head-on together. One evening, as we watched Hope and Edward play in the backyard, Jacob turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever tell anyone about what happened?" I thought for a moment, watching the bulldogs. Maybe one day, when it's just a story we can laugh about. But for now it's ours, a testament to how we survived. Jacob smiled, his hand finding mine, and we did survive. "Didn't we?" "Yes," I said, squeezing his hand. "We did," as the sun set, casting long shadows over our home. I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. The future was still uncertain, filled with potential challenges. But we were ready. We had faced the unimaginable, and through it we had found a deeper connection, a stronger love. The story of Edward and the incident would always be a part of us, a reminder of our resilience, our commitment to each other. And as I looked at Jacob, his face illuminated by the fading light, I whispered, "What will become of us now?" Question was no longer one of fear, but of anticipation of what we could build together, stronger than before. And with that we stepped into our new life, hand in hand, ready for whatever might come, knowing that together we could face it all. Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel.